Hi, Praveen.
Okay, maybe we can start, Usai.
Yes.
Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Praveen Karki, and I'm the Global Lead for Hydropower and Dams here at the World Bank. We are very fortunate today to have a really distinguished group of experts, but also people who are interested in the topic of sediment management. And here I'd like to start with a light anecdote. Hans Albert Einstein followed his parents' footsteps and studied at ETH Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. And in 1936, he did his doctoral degree on the subject of bed load transport and a probability problem. And the anecdote is that his father, Albert Einstein, said to him that he found sediments to be very complicated. So here we are today, devoting our time to this very important but often not appreciated subject. In this respect, I'm very grateful to Elisabeth Gruber at the Ministry of Finance, Government of Austria, and also to Rohit Khanna.
Praveen, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, sorry for that. I'm very grateful to Elisabeth Gruber at the Ministry of Finance, Government of Austria, and also Rohit Khanna, a manager of ESMAP at the World Bank, providing space and funding for this 2-year global sediment management program at the World Bank, which you will hear in a minute. I just need to thank the really distinguished team of experts who have been working with us on this topic for the past 2 years. And special thanks to the world's leading experts in sediment management, Dr. George Annandale, Dr. Greg Morris, Professor Helmut Habersack, and the rest of the team. And finally, I'd really like to show my appreciation for Nikos, from whom you will hear about details of the Global Sediment Management Program, to really manage it in this program on behalf of the World Bank for the past 2 years. So really, thank you and welcome to you all. Over to you, Usaid.
Thanks, Praveen. At this time, Christina, would you like to present a brief overview of the SediNet website? Let me pass over the privileges to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the introduction to Praveen. I'm Cristina Diaz, Senior Analyst at the International Hydropower Association. And for me, it's a true pleasure to be here today, personally, and on behalf of the International Hydropower Association, to be part of this initiative. So we wanted to give you a quick overview of what is in there and what you can find. So we'll go through the network, what is actually HydroSediNet, the members, activities, tools that you can find, and a bit of exploration on the website and an invitation to join. HydroSediNet is an international network to foster cooperation. As part of the network, we have all of those that are involved in sediment management, including hydropower companies, utilities, manufacturers, consulting firms, universities and research institutions, government agencies, NGOs, and financial institutions. the objective of the network really is to promote cooperation within the sediment management community, to promote sustainable sediment management and adaptation to climate change, and to share validated technical analysis tools, as well as sharing news, events, case studies, and any other information of interest and value to the community. The HydroSediNet has been part, HydroSediNet has been part of, so as I meant, the HydroSediNet has been part of global study in sediment management, as Pravin mentioned, and that has been supported by the Energy Sector Management Assistance Program, as well as with the funds received from the Austrian Federal Ministry of Finance. And as well as with some existing already members to whom we really thank all the already existing information available on the website in terms of different resources, ongoing research, and really state-of-the-art and knowledge on sediment management. So in terms of the members' activities, there is no fee to participate. That's not required. And anybody that is interested is able to join upon request. It's also important to note that any of the resources, tools, publications, events, and any other activities that are disseminated through the network and the platform are freeware, open source, and free of charge. And that being mentioned, we can go and have a quick run through the platform, hydrosedi.net. Anybody can go now and visit the website. What we have there is really information on how to join, explanation information on the relevance of sediment management and sustainably managing the sediment in our reservoirs and at the river basin. As well as like the science behind what is really sediment transport, reservoir sedimentation, same thing with sustainable sediment management, and more in-depth information, as well as different resources, references that could be used behind what the brief information that you could find on the site. As you can see here. As I said, on different aspects of sediment management. There is also a bit of information on explanation of what is HydroSediNet, the background, the history, and how it has been able to be funded and started, as well as the recognition, as we can see on the different sponsors that have been able the website and the platform, the initiative as part of the global sediment management study to be part of, and the different members with where you can dig in on specific information on each of them, the specific departments working related to sediment management and context of information. And similarly with different resources, different research projects, tool, publications, scientific papers. So there is a list that is renovated, and this is nothing that is new. Actually, the aim for this is to point out to all the existing and really relevant information, research that is available right now, to really be able to have that from a single source that is able to point out to all the great research and information available all over the world. And as we can see here, also different type of publications with the link to download, as mentioned, or as there is no fee required to join. Also, all the information available is resourced. There's a link to activities. Right now, we can see we have the inauguration of the HydroSediNet launch. I would like you to stay tuned because we'll keep updating here for activities, but moreover, webinars coming specific from the network. Different news, case studies to be reported, and of course, the possibility to join. You can just, for any organization interested, you can fill in the form, we receive the notification and will reply. And at the same time, at the bottom of the page, there is a subscribe option for anyone that is interested to really sign up and receive information on the events, activities, and anything that is happening on the site. So for that, you can visit hydrosedi.net. And of course, as I mentioned, for any organization interested to become a member, please just do so through our Join Us section. And just to mention that for any, not only organizations, but individuals that are interested, there is a possibility to sign up and subscribe for news and updates. And I'll stop here, invite you to visit the site and pass it on to you, Sai. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christina, for that very concise overview. At this time, I'd like to hand it over to Elizabeth Gruber at the Ministry of Finance of Austria to deliver a few remarks and cut the digital ribbon, as we say. Thank you.
Hello from my part, from the Ministry of Finance in Austria and from my home office, so to say. I hope you can hear me. Unfortunately, I need to use my private laptop.
We hear you.
We can hear you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. That's great, because I was not sure about it. It's a great pleasure, actually, to welcome you today and to launch this HydroSediNet on behalf of the Ministry of Finance. My name is Elizabeth Gruber, and I'm overlooking the cooperation of the Ministry of Finance with the different IFIs, and in that capacity, I'm also pleased that we cooperate with the World Bank on this issue. But first of all, let me also thank Pravin Karki and his team at the World Bank for organizing this event, as well as everyone else who contributed to it, to set up this international collaborative platform for sediment management, which we consider, of course, as very important. It's my pleasure, actually, that in cutting the digital ribbon for this platform, to share with you some of the priorities of the Austrian Ministry of Finance, and above all, why we find dialogue on sediment management so important. It may sound a little bit peculiar to you that the Ministry of Finance is engaged on that field, but I will explain, of course, why we do this. First of all, it goes without saying that access to energy is a prerequisite for poverty reduction. And in our long-standing cooperation with international financial institutions like the World Bank and others, Austria and the Ministry of Finance has been promoting the idea that sustainable hydropower has an important role to play in providing affordable energy access to the poorest. In that sense, we see importance and the value that hydropower can have in the global energy transition by helping to achieve broader climate change objectives. But in fact, we do have a strategic guidelines of our ministry that is clear on that, and which explains the programmatic approach that we have in that cooperation. It includes, next to energy, also climate change protection as one of our 4 priority areas. Another one of our priority areas is water, and is one of our long-standing priorities areas that we have in development cooperation in general. In that respect, we see our support of the ESMAP Hydropower Development Facility as closely aligned with these priorities and as a manifestation of our commitment to sustainable development goals and the climate objective of the Paris Agreement to be achieved. However, it seems important to remember that for the hydropower to be truly sustainable, issues around sediment management need to be carefully considered and to be taken into consideration. This is why actually we have been particularly interested in the global sediment management study of the Hydropower Development Facility, and we welcome, of course, this newly created network. Also, we are pleased to see that many fruits of this endeavor of the cooperation. Of the past years, ESMAP Hydropower Development Facility has supported the build-up of a pipeline of a number of projects, a sustainable hydropower project, I have to say, at the World Bank. At the same time, the work on sediment management has improved practitioners' understanding of sediment impacts and sustainable sediment management in storage reservoirs and run of river hydropower plants. This is very important for us, of course. Now, the setup of HydroSediNet is one particular output of the work on global sediment management and is an important component to establish a dialogue on the sediment management in a sustainable and forward-looking manner for stakeholders to share best practice and to keep the discussion alive. We are pleased to have been part in this dialogue and in planting the seed, so to say, for this exchange of activities, research projects, tools, and scientific papers. We're also pleased that one of the Austrian universities leading on sustainable issues, the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences, has been a driving force on sedimentation management and contributed to the setup of HydroSediNet. Another value addition that we see in this collaborative platform is that it will facilitate access to information to the wider public, including via the various webinars that are planned and hopefully continue to be planned in the near future. Looking ahead, we hope that this network will grow to include additional academic institutions, additional national representatives, additional multilateral development banks and practitioners and stakeholders that are active in the field of hydropower development and sediment management, and will serve as a knowledge hub. We also look forward to the findings being eventually firmly anchored as part of the World Bank's and other multilateral development banks' guidelines of support to hydropower. And we look forward to being in contact with the World Bank on this issue. Let me conclude by once again thanking the World Bank and all involved contributors to the HydroSediNet initiatives. We do look forward to continue the dialogue on hydropower development, sediment management, and beyond. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for really championing this topic. And at this time, I'd like to hand it over to Rohit Khanna, who is the manager of the Energy Sector Management Assistant Program at the World Bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Said, and good day, everyone. Elizabeth, good to be in contact with you again, and nice to have so many colleagues online today. So let me start off by thanking the Government of Austria for their support of the broader global sediment management program at the bank that we are implementing through ESMAP, as well as UNESCO and the IHA for their partnership in the development of SediNet. I'm pleased to join this session today. And I think it's important because I think this is a somewhat underappreciated but very, very important issue, a topic that I think should really be a centerpiece of the work of the hydro facility in the bank. And that is because sediment management is at the nexus of two vital elements of development, water and electricity. Now, water scarcity, exacerbated by climate change, currently affects more than 40% of the global population, while rapidly growing urban areas will continue to exert pressure. Although 2.1 billion people have improved water and sanitation access since 1990, dwindling drinking water supplies are affecting every continent, and water stress is intensifying in many of our client countries, along with increasing hydrological unpredictability, drought, and desertification. By 2050, it is projected that at least 1 in 4 people will be impacted by recurring water shortages. And at the same time, we see that despite progress in recent years, 789 million people live without electricity. Hundreds of million people more live with insufficient or unreliable access to it, which is roughly 15% of the global population. And it's really mostly concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa. At current rates, we project that by 2030, which is the target year for the SDGs, this number will still have about 620 million people without access if we continue on the current path. And this is pre-COVID. Now, Now, historically, hydropower has been instrumental in the development of many countries' electricity sectors because of its flexibility, reliability, maturity, and low generation cost. And associated reservoirs, meanwhile, play a vital role in water supply and flood management. This is why reservoirs are so important for both SDG 6 and its sister SDG, SDG 7. They are particularly important in areas of the world with high hydrologic variability, where the amount of water flowing in rivers varies significantly, both seasonally and from year to year. Now, unfortunately, without careful planning and without good management of river basin sediments, the services provided by hydropower facilities and dams are at risk. Ensuring the long-term resilience of these critical infrastructure facilities requires early and consistent attention to the processes of reservoir sedimentation, which reduce the storage capacity of reservoirs and damage hydromechanical equipment, posing a threat to the sustainability of hydropower, water supply, and irrigation services. Now, as I said earlier, achieving SDG 7 and meeting our climate change commitments and targets will require a significant scale up of renewable energy. The IEA estimates that clean energy transition will need quadrupling of the global share of renewable energy-based electricity by 2040, with over 70% of that increase in developing countries. In that context, the bank's financial commitments represent a significant share of global renewable energy investments in developing countries. And we look at hydropower as an essential part of that strategy for promoting renewable energy as part of the energy transition. Now, outside of fossil fuel-based generation technologies, hydropower with reservoirs for storage can presently produce commercially viable balancing power to integrate variable renewables such as wind and solar. So as we move away from fossil fuel-based sources of energy, hydropower will play a critical role, not only in its own right, but also in terms of facilitating large-scale renewable energy penetration. But to sustain this clean energy transition and maintain reliable water supply, we will need to prevent and minimize storage losses due to reservoir sedimentation. And strong sediment management policies, strategies, and good practices are needed, along with research and international collaboration to inform them. And that is why I really do welcome this SediNet platform, because it will provide that vibrant space for networking for practitioners to build momentum towards sustainable hydropower development, inclusive of good practice on sediment management. So I really hope that the Government of Austria, UNESCO, IHA, the World Bank, ESMAP, and all our clients can collaborate further on this initiative. And we really look forward to working with all of you to helping the new SediNet network to flourish. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rohit, for those comments and for opening this session so eloquently. At this time, I'd like to pass the digital microphone to Philip Pipart. I hope I'm saying it correctly, Philip. Philip is a program specialist at UNESCO, and whose work on this initiative has been key. Over to you, Philip. So, Philip, you can unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah,
yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Sid, and hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure being with you today. I'm here mainly in my capacity of representing the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program of UNESCO. I guess you all know it, this unique intergovernmental program of the United Nations system devoted to water since a few decades already, and dedicated to water research, management, related education, and capacity building development. I'm just listing these particular elements of our mission because I think they are relevant also to what we are doing today inaugurating this platform, because we consider particularly important for us in our mission to facilitate, of course, interdisciplinary integrated development of integrated approach for water management. And so we used to say we need relevant science to support decision making and management of water resources and river basins. And that's, of course, the main pillar of our mission. But we, of course, support international cooperation among in the hydrological and freshwater sciences, very much at the interface with the policymakers. And of course, we have as our in our mission, because we are UNESCO, of course, the intention to reinforce institutional and individual capacities, training, education. And we do that in the IHP through several initiatives. And one of these international initiatives since a few decades is dedicated to sedimentation, so-called International Sedimentation Initiative. This global initiative is aimed to assess erosion and sediment transport to marine, lake, or reservoir environments, and aimed at the creation of a holistic approach for the remediation and proper conservation of water resources and management. So again, in the framework of a similar initiative, we again have the purpose of promoting, developing, and improve understanding. So it's already about, again, about knowledge development and sharing on all aspects related to sediment mobilization, transport, storage, sediment budgets at different scales. So we, of course, intend through this initiative to strengthen the capacity of for sediment management. This is through education, training, promotion of cooperation among stakeholders. So putting ourselves as an interface between different actors. We do that through different initiatives, but also thanks to the support of Category 2 centers of UNESCO, like the ETH established in China since the late 80s already, and dedicated to erosion and sedimentation research and training. And of course, it's always about, for us, communicating the importance of sediment management to decision makers and even the public at large. So this sounds quite common with the purpose. We have not inaugurating and launching a HydroSediNet platform. I'm also here because I'm very happy and very proud that UNESCO for presently is also giving its contribution to the implementation of one of the components of the global study on sediment management developed by the World Bank with the support of the Austrian Ministry of Finance. And this component of the project, the framework project, is dedicated to the role of sediments in hydropower and river basin management. And we're very pleased to develop this component with the support and the coordination of the Helmut Abersack and his team in Vienna. We see him also in his capacity of chairholder of the UNESCO Chair for Integrated River Research and Management at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences in Vienna, known as Boku. And we are in that framework developing and testing and then implementing for the first time a methodology to assess the status of rivers, and we are doing that for the moment on 3 major rivers in the world: the Danube, the Mekong, and the Niger. And this will lead to the delivery, after the proper review of these documents, of status report on these 3 rivers. And of course, our hope, and also the hope of our friends and colleagues in the World Bank, is that this could inspire and guide many other major rivers of the world to follow a similar approach to assess their status. And of course, we dedicate big attention to the issue of sediment transport and management, all from the spring to the estuaries. Based on these advances and progress we hope we will make, and we'll be able to deliver very soon, we also hope to have important discussions and conversation about those issues with partners in Europe like sediment, and of course with the World Bank, IHA, and a discussion we wanted already to organize last year in China, in Beijing, and for obvious reason, you all know, we had to postpone, but we will resume the organization of this important roundtable for discussing those issues, and hopefully engage more with policymakers and potential donors to continue our cooperation on these very, very important topics. So you see in all what we are doing, these keywords are there: promote understanding, share the knowledge, educate, train, build the capacity among scientists, among managers and policymakers, inform even the public at large on all these important issues. So this sounds like a perfect common ground for cooperating. And I'm happy to be with you today. I really expect that then we will further explore together how this cooperation among us could materialize around a similar platform. And we naturally had to be there because this is in our way of doing, modus operandi in UNESCO, doing what we are doing today. So I'm very happy to join you today, and I wish you all a good continuation in this exchange. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Philippe, and we look forward to continuing our collaboration with you. With that, we will move to session 2, which is basically an overview of the Global Sediment Management Program. We're pleased to have 2 speakers with us, George Annandale and Nikos. We will start with George, who will provide a kind of contextual framing for the emergence of the Global Sediment Management Program that is by the World Bank. George Annandale, I like to say jokingly that he's the Ronaldinho of sediment management globally, but he has been working on water resource infrastructure with a particular focus on the complex dynamics between climate change, hydrology, and reservoir sedimentation for the better part of 40 years. And he's the author of Quenching the Thirst. And with that, I'd like to invite him to set the scene for us for session 2. Over to you, George, if you're not muted. You should be able to unmute, yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, thanks, you said. What I'm gonna do is, the intent of this setting the scene is just to relate the aspects of sedimentation, storage, hydropower generation, climate change. So I'm going to do that with a presentation just to get the scene going. And CD must just tell me if you see everything is okay. Just hang on 1 second. I need to bring this here, I think. Oh, you see that?
Are you able to share, George?
What is that like? No, yeah.
There should be the share screen button at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, I did that, but it's not getting me to the right place. Is it here?
You have a double screen.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, let's see if I. Oops. You see that?
Nothing appears for me, unfortunately.
Oh my God. Okay, let's just see screen 3.
Usaid, why don't we switch over to Nikos and I'll work with George.
Okay.
Yep.
Hi, Nikos.
Okay. Hello, everybody. So my name is Nikos Eftimiou, and I'm working together with Pravin and a big team that I will describe a little bit later. And in the next few minutes, I would like to give you an overview of the deliverables of the Global Sediment Management Study. So the awareness of the challenges associated with reservoir storage loss due to sedimentation increases. And this happens as the fleet of reservoirs globally is aging. So this has been identified by World Bank, and the Global Sediment Management Study program has been implemented through the ESMAP Hydropower Facility. The program has been funded by the Austrian Ministry of Finance after an initiative that started through discussions with Professor Helmut Habersack. And of course, we would like to acknowledge the financial support by the Austrian government. So the objectives of the Global Sediment Management Study is to improve the practitioners' understanding of sedimentation, of the impacts of sedimentation on the beneficial uses of the reservoirs, and to support the planning, the implementation, and the operation of effective and sustainable, this is a key word, sediment management, both in storage reservoirs as well as in runoff river hydropower schemes. So the team that is working for the Global Sediment Management Program includes World Bank peer reviewers. We're discussing so for the progress and for the different tasks of the program. A large team of colleagues at the University of Natural Resources and Life Science in Vienna, under the leadership of Professor Helmut Habersack and the management of Dr. Michael Trithart. We are working also together with the University of the Philippines in Diliman and Professor Guillermo Tabias. So very important partners are IHA, the International Hydropower Association, and UNESCO, the International Hydrological Program. And we have been working also with Raphael Smith from Stanford University, as well as with a large team of consultants, including George Annandale, Gregory Morris, and many colleagues in different places of the world, who are specialized in sediment management and different aspects of this topic. Without any delay, I would like to go to the first activity, which we could say that it serves to spread the word of sediment management. And this includes the publication, the elaboration and publication of case studies on both reservoir and basin levels. So we will publish 15 reservoir case studies and 3 basin case studies that will provide a description of the hydrological and sedimentological aspects of the sediment management strategy that has been applied. And they will focus both on successful and unsuccessful attempts with the idea is to draw lessons from existing experiences. So the second part of this activity is to publish a sediment management ebook to help convey the message. This will emphasize modern data visualization through photography, story maps, and infographics. And it will display the major concepts of sediment management and its long-term benefits, the technical strategies for its implementation, and requirements for success, including also monitoring, as well as suggested policy directions. Finally, so in this activity, we have set up an international sediment management network. so HydroSediNet, which we are very happy to launch today. And Christina provide the description, and we will hear more also later. In the second activity, so we could say that this is addressed to the engineering community, and this includes the preparation of technical design guidelines and toolkit. So the technical toolkit includes the preparation of the RESED, which is an acronym for Reservoir Sedimentation, HCL toolkit, which will comprise technical analysis tools that will enable calculations for assessing sediment yield with rating curves, assessment of sediment properties, such as the bulk density or the sediment compaction over time, prediction of dimensions of channels incised in deposits after flushing, and other calculations. This will serve for a preliminary assessment of basic information that can be used in any sediment management analysis. Furthermore, in this activity, we are finalizing Reservoir Conservation 2, RESCON 2, which is a model that is used for a preliminary assessment and screening of the state-of-the-art sediment management method. This model is upgraded, and the improvements focus on enhancing its usability and stability through improvement of the graphical user interface, converting the existing program to a standalone software, moving thus beyond spreadsheets, as well as incorporating a variety of technical enhancements to extend the capabilities of the model, including assessing the reservoir performance if we apply different techniques simultaneously, concurrently, and improving the economic performance of the economic appraisal that is intrinsically performed through this analysis. Finally, we have prepared catchment modeling guidelines, which serve for a first assessment of the different alternatives available of different surface erosion models, and this can serve and help the analysis of catchment management, which is one of the available sediment management techniques. In the third activity, Usaid and George are working on the compilation of recommendations for policy guidelines, and this need was revealed after a comparative analysis which indicated a significant policy gap in legal and institutional frameworks for managing sedimentation in reservoirs. So here you can see a map that has been prepared by the team, by USAID, that shows that only few countries, indicated by the yellow light green color, have already existing policies or practices dedicated to managing reservoir sedimentation. So to address this identified lack of policies, a guidance note has been prepared, and which outlines a set of policy recommendations, including guidance for topics such as governance, assessment, prioritization and scheduling, economic analysis, engineering design, and many other topics. So these recommendations are intended to support policymakers, regulators, hydropower operators, owners, and developers. The fourth activity is dedicated to capacity building and knowledge transfer. First, here we have organized a large number of workshops and webinars. We have provided training to more than 300, I would say, engineers, but not only engineers, but also decision makers and policy makers in different places of the world. This activity is, of course, continuing. We've been discussing together with Professor Habersack, and with UNESCO, there is planned also a series of webinars dedicated to integrated river basin management that will also be followed by webinars on specific case studies, such as the Danube Basin, so the Mekong Basin, and the Niger River Basin. So the other part of this activity is the integration into UNESCO's World's Large River Initiative. So here, as Philip described earlier today, so we have developed, UNESCO has developed a standardized methodology for the description of the status of large rivers based on different hydrological and hydraulic, as well as water quality and ecology, sediment transport and morphodynamics, river management and socioeconomic metrics. And for different scales, spaces, and times. And at the lower part of the screen, you can see an example for the Danube River, which shows the development of sediment yield along Danube River for before and after construction of dams. And this can help identify how sediment management can support the river continuity along a river. Finally, in the last activity of the program, we are conducting a sediment management study in an existing reservoir in Philippines, where we have conducted a field measurement campaign and compiled an operational monitoring plan. So we performed surface erosion modeling in the upstream catchment of the reservoir, numerical modeling of the reservoir for different operational regimes, as well as of the river downstream of the dam, and a physical model. Furthermore, in this activity, we have organized a series of webinars that helped inform the reservoir owners and their engineers about the impacts of sedimentation and how sediment management can be implemented best in this specific case study. With this, I would like to close this presentation. Thank you so much. And in the global sediment management study will run till end of April this year. And within the coming months, all the deliverables of the study will be freely available in the public domain. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. George, let's return to you. I will try to share your presentation from my end. And if you want to unmute yourself, George, at this time.
Okay, thank you, Sid. I think when we start looking at sustainable management of water supply infrastructure, in the way we look at it here is that we need to look at both managing sediment and climate change. And next. What you need to do is to start off with the impacts of climate change, because that gives us guidance on what we should do on reservoir sedimentation management and the importance of it. The issue is that climate change will result in hydrological change, which is changes in the mean flow, increased hydrologic variability, and then increased sediment loads. And the essence is that those changes will threaten the reliability of water supply, irrigation, hydropower, and flood management. Next. So what do we do? In essence, in the case of water supply, irrigation, and hydropower, we can experience longer droughts, and larger floods. So in order to regulate the flow of water, we will need larger storage so that we can capture these large floods and then release it during droughts. And then this next, in the case of flood management, these large floods will need larger reservoir storage to ensure attenuation of these floods. So I think the essence here that I'll expand on further on is that due to the effects of climate change, we'll need increased amounts of storage to satisfy both water supply and hydropower and flood management needs. Next. Now, until recently, you know, when it came to dam safety on dams, the focus was on the structure. And recently, with this publication of this book by the World Bank called Laying the Foundations, it focuses on dam safety, but you'll see on the right-hand side that this checklist for identifying good international practices includes looking at sedimentation and climate change effects. Next. So what we are doing, what we are doing here is that HydroSediNet we can view as an extension of this effort or this result by the World Bank that takes us further, gives us a further opportunity to link dam safety needs and the other needs of sustainable hydropower infrastructure. Next. So I think one thing that we need to always remember is that dams are not really monuments to engineering ingenuity. And we have to look at the purpose of dams in order to figure out how to manage them in a reliable and sustainable manner. So the purpose of dams is essentially two things. The one is to create storage, and the storage is created to ensure the reliability of water supply, irrigation, flood management, and hydropower. And secondly, to produce head. This is the purpose that we want to sustain. As if we can't do that, then we can't really claim that we have sustainably developed the infrastructure. Next. Oh, you've jumped one. So the question then, if we talk about sustainable development, we need to decide, you know, what do we mean by that? And in this context, I refer to the Brundtland Commission report, which I think is a widely used definition, but it's a very important definition. And I'll read it for you. It says, sustainable development seeks to meet the needs and aspirations of the present without compromising the ability to meet those of the future. Next. So what it really focuses on is creating intergenerational equity. Next. So what does it mean? It means that we need to create fairness between generations. And this is as true in water supply infrastructure as anything else. Next. And what it also says is that environmental stabilization is not the focus of sustainable development. It's a desirable consequence. But as you will see, as we go through these webinars in the future, and as you already know as experts in this field, is then when we look at sustainable sediment management, we have to look at both the upstream catchment and downstream catchment and have a holistic view. So next. So what it really comes down to, if we want to have a brief summary of the concept of sustainable development, it means that we want to harmonize the environmental, engineering, and economic aspects of projects, next, with the main purpose to generate intergenerational equity. That is really what we are focusing on. So once we've done that, next, what we want to do now is to say, well, once we've defined what we mean by sustainable development, what is, how do we sustainably develop a resource? And as you know, there are two types of resources, renewable and exhaustible resources. And the only type of resource that we can really develop in a sustainable manner is renewable resources. And we do that by using it at a rate that is smaller than the rate of regeneration. That's a very important concept, which we will come to in a minute. But just keep that in mind, because we will deal with that a little bit further next. So you have these two resources, just to emphasize it, if we have mining, which is an exhaustible resource, the concept of sustainable development is an oxymoron. Whereas, in the case of renewable resources like developing wheat, that we can do in a sustainable manner. Next. So then, if we come to the whole issue of water, using it for water supply and for hydropower, we obviously need to first say, well, what is water a renewable or an exhaustible resource? And to get some idea of how much water we have on Earth, we can compare the amount of water placed in a sphere to that of the diameter of the Earth. So next. The diameter of the Earth is 12,756 kilometers. Whereas, if we take all the water on Earth, ice caps, everything, we place that in a sphere, it fills a sphere with only 1,383 kilometers. So it's much smaller than the diameter of the Earth. And next, if you look at that resource, it is exhaustible. Now, what we are really interested in is the fresh water on Earth. And there are two natural freshwater sources, main sources that we can use. The one is accessible fresh groundwater. And we take all that groundwater and put it in a sphere. It fills a sphere with a diameter of 69 kilometers. And next, and if we take all the river water on Earth and we place that in a sphere, it fills a sphere with a diameter of only 16 kilometers. It's just very, very small amounts of water compared to the diameter of the Earth. But the good news is next is that this is a renewable resource because of the hydrological cycle. Next. So the question then is, if we have these two resources, which one has the greatest potential for sustainable development? And that's where you get back to Herman Daly's specification of how to sustainably develop a renewable resource. Next. Now, if you look at what the residence time of these rivers, the water in these systems are, it gives us an idea of the replenishment time of water in the systems. For example, the residence time of water in a aquifer is about 1,400 years. And in a river is 16 to 18 days. Alternatively, what this means is that we would suddenly remove all the fresh groundwater on Earth from all these aquifers. It'll take 1,400 years for it to reestablish. And if we suddenly take all the river water out of rivers on Earth, it'll be back in about 2 weeks. So now next, if we compare that with the daily use of water, we can see next that the retention time of groundwater is much greater than the usage time, and that the retention time or replenishment time for river water is roughly on the same scale as river water. So this gives us a sort of a gut feel that most probably river water has a greater potential for sustainable development. Next. And this is confirmed by this research here at the University of Utrecht and also at McGill in Canada. And they came up with this concept of a groundwater footprint. And essentially what it means is that, if, for example, if you look at the upper Ganges, it's got a footprint of 54, which means that they are using 54 times more water out of the aquifer than what's replenished on an annual basis. And if you look globally, our global footprint is 3.5. It means that globally, we are using 3.5 times more groundwater than what is replenished on an annual basis. Next. So this confirms our sort of decision or conclusion that rivers has the greatest potential for sustainable development. Next. But the thing that we need to deal with in rivers is that there is hydrologic variability. It's not a constant flow. And there are two scales. One is a within year hydrologic variability, and the other one is multiple year. Next. If we look at within year, you know, this is a hydrograph of flow versus months, and you see for every year, the hydrograph roughly looks the same. There's not a lot of variation. We may need some small storage during the winter time to provide some water, but it's mainly run-of-river storage. Next. But if we come to other rivers, like this hydrograph, every bar on it represents the annual flow volume in a year. And next, if you look at that red line is the average flow. And then you see there, for example, is a period of 11 years where the annual flows in the river is lower than the mean annual flow. Next, and if we want to provide water out of this river, we have to have very large storage in that long periods of drought to provide a reliable supply of water and power. Next. So if we just want to get some idea of how these values come together, we can, for example, prepare graphs relating the yield, that is the amount of water that I can get out of a river, versus reliability for certain variabilities of flows. So if you have no storage and you have very low variability, you can see that next, that we can get about 80% of the mean annual flow out of this river at 90% reliability. That is pretty good. Next, but if we then look at high variability rivers, there's no way that we can guarantee any water at 90% reliability. Okay, so now what do? Next, if we now look at this situation and we construct a dam in a river and it has a certain volume next of say 1 times the mean annual flow, then this curve shifts upward. And what we find now is that at about for 90% reliability, we can provide about 70% of the mean annual flow on a regular basis. Next. So where in the world do we have multiple year droughts currently? These gold areas indicate that. And what it means is that droughts regularly occur over periods of 2 or more years. You know, like South Africa, where I'm originally from, I recall growing up with always having water restrictions around, and the droughts there are regularly 5 to 7 years long. Next. So if we now look at climate change, how is this going to influence our reliability of water supply? And there are 2 things that are important. One is the changes in mean annual flow, and the other is changes in hydrologic variability. Next. Now for mean annual flow, you know, these kind of graphs have been developed for a long time, and there are areas where the flow is going to decrease and other areas where it's going to increase. But this is not really the most important factor. Next. The most important factor in climate change is the increase in hydrologic variability. That'll have the greatest impact on water supply. Next. So then just to do a sort of a back of the envelope to see what will happen if hydrologic variability increases in the future, I just made an assumption that it will increase, say, by 25% globally. So just to get some indication. Next. So if we now look at that, you can see that those golden areas increase quite significantly. And the areas where it already exists, obviously there, the intensity of these droughts will increase. Next. You know, so this whole concept of using very large storage to supply water over multiple years was originally conceptualized in Spain. And if you look on the left-hand side, you can see that Spain at this point in time already have multiple year droughts they have to deal with, and that this most probably is going to increase over most of Europe. It's going to increase over Africa, and it's something that we need to deal with. Next. So then to re-emphasize what do we do, if we look at increased hydrologic variability, that is the proxy for climate change, and we prepare a graph between yield and hydrologic variability for, say, a storage volume in the reservoir of 60% of the mean annual flow. Next. As the climate change becomes effective and it increases hydrologic variability from 0.3 to 0.6, you can see there's a significant decrease in the yield from this reservoir just because of climate change. Next. So one thing to do is to build a larger reservoir, having less of an effect, and next, an even larger. And so the larger we build, the more storage we have, the lesser the effect of climate change will be on the reliability of water supply. Next. So this is really a key concept that is important when it comes to sustainable management of reservoirs. Next. So the thing that next you said. So what happens is, we have all these reservoirs around the world, but they are filled with sediment. Okay. And this is really a threat to sustainable development as we lose storage, because as these reservoirs are filled with sediment, there's less space for water to be stored. Next. And the combined effect of climate change and sedimentation is significant. If we combine it, you can see that there's a much lesser as the reservoir storage decreases from the red line to the black dashed line, the change in yield that can reliably be delivered is significant. So this is an important issue. Next. So then, well, let's look at the global availability of storage. And if we look at these graphs, the constructed storage is shown in that top black line, and next the two lower lines gives an estimate of the net storage available globally. And this estimates is that we're losing storage at about between 0.8% and 1% per year. So you can see that in essence, we are losing more storage than what we're adding annually due to the construction of new dams. Next. And if we look at the effect of population growth, we can see that we're even in a worse situation. Now we are roughly where we were in the 1960s when we look at per capita net storage. Next. So there are methods to manage the sediment and retain reservoir storage, or as best we can. These are established methods, has been implemented in the past. So the question is, why don't we do that? Next. And one of the reasons why we don't do it is that the current economic analysis approaches don't look that far into the future. Okay, next. You'll see that most studies that you look at, there's no assignment of cost to storage loss or to building new reservoirs, anything like that. This cash flow is just a simple, it's ends and year end, and those costs are ignored. Next. And the reason why we do that, even if we would include those costs at the high interest rates that we use, or discount rates that we used in the past, next, if we would discount that, it becomes almost zero. You skipped a slide here, but okay, go next. Click, and no, just leave it. So it becomes very small, so we can essentially ignore it. Next, if we now look at the economics of exhaustible resources, and there's been a lot of other work done on this, but Utelling was one of the first people to deal with it. And what he said is, if you're dealing with a exhaustible resource, which is currently the assumption that reservoirs are exhaustible, that they'll just lose all their storage over a certain period of time, that what one should do is you should increase the discount rate over time. And if you do that, then it means that that you don't, if you discount that damage, the full cost comes up to front. Okay, so this is a big discussion in economics. I'm just introducing the concept here. But the important thing is that if we do not take account of those costs in the future, we cannot develop sustainable development plans for our reservoirs. Next. And this brings us to the question, well, is a reservoir exhaustible or renewable? And the issue is really that it depends on what we do. If we decide to design a dam and reservoir that will allow it to fill with sediment, then we decide that it's an exhaustible resource. On the other hand, if we design a dam and reservoir where we manage sediment and maintain reservoir storage as best we can, then we classify it as a renewable resource. So this is a decision that we make. This is important. Next. So this brings us then back to this whole issue of a design life. So this design life is used in economic analysis and it's used in engineering design. And, you know, in conventional infrastructure like roads, the use of a design life is completely acceptable. You know, you can design a road or a highway for, say, a 20-year design life. At the end of that time, you come back and you refurbish it, and you can essentially use it in perpetuity, and you have created intergenerational equity. But when it comes to dams and reservoirs, once a reservoir is filled with sediment, it's almost impossible to do anything with it, and it's lost. So one need to get away from this design life concept when it comes to design and management of dams and reservoirs. Next. And where we need to move towards is a life cycle management approach, where we design and build dams, we operate and maintain them, remove sediment, refurbish them. And the intent, in theory, is to use them in perpetuity so that future generations can also benefit from what we've done. Next. So just to summarize, to provide resilience against climate change for the services that we're going to get from reservoirs, we want to ensure the reliability of water supply, irrigation, flood management, and hydropower by providing large reservoir storage. Okay, and secondly, next. And in order to do that, the first thing we need to do is to understand the nature of reservoir storage. It's a dual nature. It's either renewable or exhaustible. Okay, and it's our decision. And the threat of reservoir sedimentation is that we're going to experience storage loss, and that our goal is to create intergenerational equity. And to get there, we need to reassess the way that we economically develop, assess projects, and we also need to adopt a life cycle management approach, not the design life approach. So this is sort of the basic context of where we are working from. Thanks, you said.
Thanks very much, George. And our final session is an announcement of a series of SediNet webinars that will complement this international platform and network. And here to discuss it is Helmut Hebersack from the University of Natural Resources, Boku, in Austria, and I'm very pleased to welcome him to the program.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, Yusuf?
Yes.
Okay, can you see the slide as well?
Yes.
Okay. Dear ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for the invitation to be with you today. I think it's a very great moment to have this inauguration of the HydroSediNet, but also to show you some of the results, what we are doing in this global project. And in the forefront, I want to thank Mrs. Gruber on behalf of the Federal Ministry of the Republic of Austria, who was funding this program, but also ESMAP and the World Bank to take over this responsibility, and also UNESCO and Philippe to cooperate and to work together with us on this project. Basically, the idea came along maybe 5-6 years ago, and exactly what George was talking about, it was a question to me at least, are reservoirs sustainable? What can we do? And there were some chats, and I will try to answer these in my talk as well. It's not only about the reservoir, but it's also about the whole river basin and how the interaction of reservoirs and the interlinkage between the mountains and the sea can be seen. That's what I want to go on in this talk especially as well. And the main idea of this is that this cannot be a work of one researcher like me. This has to be done on a global perspective. And so I'm very happy to have more than 100 people here. I see many friends, or I can read the names of many friends, and I'm really looking forward to a continuation of this webinar series, where I already know that different universities have committed to present things of their research as well in this series. So I think it's a starting point of a motion with the end to get more sustainable reservoirs in an integrated river management. So my talk, as you see, is sustainable sediment management in the context of integrated river basin management. The outline of my talk is to introduce a little bit to the subject and focus on the problems associated with reservoir sedimentation in a larger context. That brings me as well to the fluid geomorphology and the engineering, economics, and environmental aspects, how we can optimize all these three components, hopefully in the future better than in the past. Then I have to deal a little bit with the sediment management in the river basin, and due to time restrictions, of course, I cannot talk about also the Niger and the Mekong, and there are many other people here that work in these river basins. I will focus on the Danube, so to say, my home basin, in order to show you one example what I mean with this improvement that is needed in terms of the sustainable development. And also we'll talk a little bit only about sediment-related measures, because I'm sure that there will be following webinars that concentrate more on some technical special issues related to measures. And finally, I want to summarize and to give you an outlook of the future from my perspective. Now, this is just one of the thousands of pictures you could have. This is a reservoir in the western part in Vorarlberg, goes to the Switzerland border of Austria. And you can see, if you see my mouse here, the people and the machine here, this is a reservoir that is already filled up to the water intake structure, which is not a very good idea, because you all know we wouldn't want to have the sediments in close contact with the turbines. If you think of the Pelton turbines and the operation, there's a lot of research done in this domain. So in other words, we have a lot of sedimentation, and once you reach this, it's very not sustainable anymore, because how can you dredge this material? Where is this material going to? What is the cost about this? These costs for sure have not been taken into the design and the economic evaluation of that reservoir. So that's just what George explained before. And it's also interesting, already in 2003, the Third World Water Forum said that whereas the last century, 20th century, was concerned with reservoir development, in the 21st century, we need to focus on sediment management. The objective will be to convert today's inventory of non-sustainable infrastructure for future generations. So that means, in other words, we have to clean up the reservoirs in a sustainable way, and we have to also look into the, let's say, transformation of aging reservoirs, but as well for the new ones. Many new reservoirs are built, and we think we have to look into this topic more than in the past. Now, just an example of the Austrian condition. You see here the famous Kaprun, at least here, famous Kaprun hydropower plant, just built after the Second World War to start the economic growth with the Marshall Plan, which was helping Europe to build up the economy again. And this is one of the largest Austrian Danube runoff hydropower plants. So this is a reservoir, and this is a impoundment in terms concerning the Danube. I'm just looking into the chat if there's something for me. Okay, I will try to answer that a little bit later. So anyway, I want to put the reservoirs and the impoundment in the catchment context. So here are some sort of mountains. As you see, the water comes from there, and there's a reservoir. And you see over time, many more reservoirs have been built. So we are having here now about more than 5,000 reservoirs in a very small country. And it started all in 1880. And since then, we had the development of all these reservoirs and dams. Now, of course, this means that we have to look into the sedimentation. As you see and saw before, this is filling up here the reservoir, but we have also erosion from the agricultural fields. So we have some sort of sister problem, which comes from the agriculture with the deforestation, but also intensification of agriculture, where we have soil erosion, a very valuable good on this planet, together with, of course, the water, and this fills up the reservoirs additionally. Or if you think of the rainforest deforestation, we have also these sorts of interactions. The more we have these processes, the more sediments we have there. But also, if you look on the glacier melting of climate change, so people doubt about climate change sometimes, but if you look into the glaciers in Austria, they will be gone in about 30 years. And we have permafrost, which is thawing, so we get more rockfalls, more sediment production anyway. So we must be aware that this problem is not going away alone. It's even intensifying by these climate change-driven processes, but also by intensification of the agriculture. Now we have the filling up of the reservoirs, impoundments, but in the middle, we have also in between, we have erosion of the riverbed and erosion of the coastline at the end, and I will show you this as well. So it's not restricted anymore to the structures and the infrastructure, but it's expanding to the whole basin at the end of the day. And this is not to be stopped. We have 3.4 tons per hectare per year from the agriculture. Here in this country, we have still an uplift of the alpine environment. We have about 1.6 millimeter per year uplift of the Alps. There's nothing compared to the Himalaya. I saw Arun Kumar and some other ones from India here in this webinar. They know that the Himalaya is much faster rising up. But anyway, tectonics is not stopped. We still have alpine uprising. We still have frost in the winter despite of climate change. So we have to assume that we get more production or ongoing production of the sediments. On the other side of the scale, we have here the erosion at the rate of a few centimeters per year. Yeah, but this is enough to get on the long term, as you will see for the Danube, too much erosion, which is hindering other usages of the river. But it's not only about this, it's also about costs. We have a lot of cost if we look into dredging, because in Austria and in many countries, the problem is when you dredge and you take it out of the system, it becomes waste. Sediments are not waste. But if it is waste by law, then you have to dump it somewhere at a rate and a cost rate of about 20 euros per cubic meter. Now we have only in this small country here about 30 million cubic meters of sediment only in torrent controlled retention basins. And where are the waste disposal sites to put it to? Is the space available for this? So we think it's not an option to dredge and dump it somewhere, but we have to reconnect the upstream and downstream by stopping the interruption or to get back again the continuity of sediments to flow from the mountains downstream. This is not easy, I know, but we can also dredge and redump. That's another option, but not to take it out of the system and dump it somewhere. It's a lot of costs, millions of euros per year. We have also costs because of flushing. If we flush, it's cost because you can't produce energy. So we talk also about several 100,000 euros per flushing per year. And if it's done in the wrong way, we have to pay for the ecological consequences of this. And we have to pay compensation because of destroyment of habitats or colmation processes. It's also about a few hundreds of thousands of years per flushing event in our country. And we have also the importance of floods. When we think about here, you see remobilization, I show you this a little bit later, remobilization of the reservoir with sedimentation downstream. And this is a damage to some farming areas, damage to houses and infrastructure, which is another cost you would have to pay if the reservoirs are flushed unintendedly just by chance when the gates are opened because of a flood. So as you see, there's a lot, millions of euros involved in this sediment management. So it might be also economically interesting to get rid of these costs, which is a win-win situation, hopefully, with the other topics I show you. Now, what we do here is, in parallel to this global project, we work on a 7-year research project together with Andritz, Voigt, and with the energy companies. You see them here. Verbund is the largest one in Austria, but also with the waterway administration. I show you this only to show you that I think we all together, not only we here in Austria, but I would really hope that all the countries that are here in this webinar work on this, and I know many of them worked on this, to intensify our common efforts to increase also the knowledge and also the research capacities on this topic. Now, what is the problem about? I think can be fast with this because it's very well known. Actually, we have sedimentation, some pictures here. But if you look at this one here, this is a Spanish, I think it was a reservoir filled up completely. And we had a European project and we had the options. What can we do here? One is, of course, to decommission this dam. This would be something that could be discussed. The other one was just to extend the height, to double the height of the dam. By that, you get more new reservoir volume because it's a flat slope here on the side. Then we get even more reservoir volume related to the height. Also, there are options, of course, to increase the continuity. We thought that, for example, increase the height would be not sustainable because it's just prolongating the problem of the sedimentation to the future, to the next generations. So we need to really work on the topic of how can we improve the situation. But we have also here issues with colmation of the riverbed clogging and not availability of spawning gravel that is mobile for the fish, for example, to reproduce. So we have all these things in the reservoir. And downstream, we could have something like this. This is an extreme example, I know, but it shows us when we have a river that has gravel bed, like in the alpine areas, and we have a subsurface fine material coming from the marine deposits of the Tethys here or other ancient oceans, then we have fine material below there, sand, silt, and clay. Now, if we reach this line here, suddenly it can occur like this, what we call a riverbed breakthrough. So the riverbed is cutting into the fine material. You can have bridge collapses. You can have all sorts of flood risk for the next flood to be coming, or we have an issue with the fish. Fish cannot jump on the gravel bar and spawn if there's no water anymore. We would have also an issue with navigation at the Danube. And these rivers here, some of them in our country show how close we are to this area. So we work to fight against the riverbed breakthrough. We have at the Danube 1 meter lift in some places, in the Mur River and so on. So there are many other countries, I think, that could expose these things. But this is an extreme example. It's not necessary to get to this point. Even if we have erosion and a lower rate, we can get rid of all the spawning places and get a negative ecological impact. And then in the same river Salzach here, we had here cross section. The height was here in 53, 75, 95, 2001. People were arguing, we have now 10 years time or more to do countermeasures until we reach this magic line here. But the time was too short because 1 year later, in one flood, again, we had an erosion rate of 3-4 meters and again a breakthrough. So we are in some places very close to issues where we have to act in time. And this can be only done in a cooperation with hydropower, with storm control works, with flood protection and so on. For the flood risk, we could observe things when we are starving sediments, but even if we are not starving, we have these processes. In extreme events larger than 100 years recurrence interval, we can observe this here, that the river, what was a small river used here in the floodplain, can be eroding everything what is there, with people dying there if there's a house eroded. And we get a backwards development of the river to a semi-braided morphology with bars afterwards. And we have the ecosystem, the fish. We all know that many fish, they lay their eggs into the gravel, like here, and then it's the question, is it stable, this gravel, or not? When is it eroded? We can use habitat models, and I have not time to talk with these. Tehavi is here, I think, and other ones that work a lot with these habitat models, and we did that in many places, and we could see, of course, sediment transport and habitat suitability is very much related. It's about the eggs, if they're eroded or not, if even the grain sizes are available, or if we have then let's say habitats where the fish can stand to feed, or where they can have refuge areas to swim into that area to be not affected by a flood, for example. So sediments and fish and changes of the sediment condition affect directly the ecosystem. Of course, all this has a lot of impacts. We have beta deficit, we have degradation, we could have aggradation, of course, we have it in the reservoir, and so on. We have a change of the transport capacity, the shear stress. At the end, all our rivers, or many of our rivers, actually, they are changed completely from natural dynamic system to an anthropogenically managed one. And if we are aware of this, we can take some actions at the end. And just to give you this example of the Danube to illustrate a little bit more what I mean with that, This graph was shown by Nikos before. This is the Danube River from the Black Sea upstream to Germany, more or less from the Black Forest in Germany to Romania to the Black Sea. This you see here is the largest basin in Europe, the most international river basin on a global scale, with 18 countries involved, with all sorts of histories here on the Balkan areas. Not wanting to go into this, not easy to manage such a diverse river basin. It has about 83 million inhabitants, so it's about almost one fifth of the European population. What you see anyway is here a dotted line, which was the sediment transport, in this case suspended sediment load, including sand before the hydropower plants were erected and afterwards. And what you see here is a reduction in the outflow to the Black Sea from about 15 to 20 million tons per year to now 40 to 60 million tons. So this is a reduction at the end of about 60%. Now, this is not always the same. Like here, we are at river kilometer 2000 in Vienna. Here, we have a less, it seems less here, but relative to the scale, it's also 1/3 of the sediment that was reduced. You can see it even better here, maybe. We have also tried to solve this simple sediment budget equation, but as you may know, and if you work in this area, it's not easy to get, for example, the dimensions of sedimentation on the floodplain, how much it is really, or how much is the abrasion rate and so on. So we tried to come up anyway with still a balance for the whole Danube, which was 4 years work, I guess. And what you see is, just to compare the two figures here, these are the million tons per year transport in a historic condition, more or less, and an existing situation. Now you see from a mighty Danube, we came down to a very small, thin, thirsty, and hungry Danube. I think Matt Condorf and other ones, they always talk about hungry rivers these days. This is not only at the Danube, it's the same at the Rhine River, a minus of 70%. It's the same at the Mekong, increasing over time. It's the same at the Mississippi River and the many other ones. So at the end, you see always a decrease here, especially here, Kapchikovo and Iron Gate 1 and 2. But you see also in the tributaries a large change. So at the end, we don't want really to go back in time to this situation, because also this huge amount has problems caused with flood protection and so on. But we need to find a way in between somewhere where we get a more sustainable development. Why I'm saying this? What is the consequence of this? And the consequence, I think Jos Brils mentioned this in his chat and other ones, the consequence, if we have this reduction of 60%, like at the Danube example, you see coastal erosion. Coastal erosion, you see it here, you see it in this trend line, you see it here in a qualitative analysis. And we did some satellite analysis as well, and we came up with, together with the Romanian colleagues, they were doing the main job, coastal erosion of about up to 24 meters per year. Now you see then all sorts of impacts for tourism, for example. No one wants to make holidays behind these kind of structures, and they are not really helping on the long term because there's still erosion going on and get a collapse of these structures. So at the end, at the lower end of the Danube, here's the St. Georg Canal and then the Sulina and so on. So we have to look into coastal erosion. This is a reason for the European Union to say we have to do some action there. We cannot wait until this process goes on. And Ukrainian researchers also could confirm the rates what we calculated with the submarine erosion of the delta here within the Black Sea. You could say it's only in Romania, what I'm interested in that. But the problem is in the free-flowing section, we see as well erosion of the free-flowing sections. This is a picture of a diagram of the Austrian Danube. You see the erosion of up to almost 1 meter now in this period of only 30 years. And it started beforehand and it goes on into the future despite we do anything here. But we started, of course, countermeasures east of Vienna. But this is a rate only maybe 1 to 3 centimeters per year. But as you see on the long term, it is 1 meter, and 1 meter lower riverbed means a lot in terms of stability of riverbank protections, in terms of groundwater level lowering, in terms of the drying up of the national park, what we have here, but also in terms of navigation. And if it comes to a breakthrough, as shown before, it's even a catastrophic situation. The same is seen here with the cross-section, a clear, undoubtedly change of the riverbed height. It's not only here in Austria and Germany, but also in Hungary. You see the dates here, meters of erosion, but even in the Romanian 1,000 kilometer long border section to Bulgaria, which should be an aggradational zone by the geomorphological standards, we have here also erosion. And even in the delta canals, we have erosion. If you add this up, because in the reservoirs we have just the opposite of sedimentation, then we see here the summary for a whole basin, or for the main river at least, which means we have about 56% the red areas, all that is erosion, and we have about 34% sedimentation, mainly in Iron Gate here, 300 kilometer reservoir up to Belgrade in Serbia. We have the Gabčíkovo reservoir, and we have the Austrian 10 ones, and in Germany as well. Now here, this is a bracket number 29, because here in Romania, the data were a little bit unsure and uncertain, so we could only take the gauging stations for the analysis, but they all showed the erosion. So we could confirm in the meantime with other data as well that we have the erosion. So it's a disbalanced situation at the Danube, only 10% in a so-called equilibrium. Although we all know that equilibrium is not really existing on the long term, but we don't want to get these negative trends. And we get all sorts of problems. I think I showed that before, so I don't have to go into this again. Now, if you look into floods, some strange things occur, like this here. This is a 100 years flood in 2013. This is a gauging station at the end of the Austrian section. And you see, we measured here in the peak of the flood. The flood had a peak of about 10,500 cubic meters per second. But with a turbidity meter, we could see that the sediment peak was 1 to 1.5 days earlier. So how can the sediments be faster at the end of the Austrian section than the water? So we were too late with our in situ measurements, because we thought maybe it is on the same peak, but we all know the hysteresis effects, but in this dimension, we were not aware of this. So actually we thought, how can that be? How can be the sediments faster than the water? And so we did some analysis and found out, of course, the water was mainly originating from the alpine area, but the sediment source must be closer to this measurement point than the water. And we could find the source. This is one of the 10 reservoirs in Austria, where you see over time the sedimentation rate. It adds up to about 23 million cubic meters from 1965, more or less, to 2002. And then a big flood, a 100 years flood came, and we see a dropping of this line, an unintended flushing of this reservoir. And afterwards it was closed again, the gates, sedimentation. 2013 came another 100 years flood. So far about the statistics, we all know about this. Another remobilization and another downstream transport. Now you see here the effects. 3 meters of deposition. Here's a person with lots of damages. And so the question is, should we always go in this zigzag line, or could we have a continuous transfer of the sediments to the downstream area, ultimately at the coastline, to rebuild the delta and the coastline? We don't need it here, but some other places we need it. And you see this big spike here. This is the one reservoir. We know it's not easy to do the measures, but this is the interplay between the hydropower and the other sectors in order to work together. And the good news was that last year, at the end, in 2020, the decision was taken by the International Commission for the Protection of the Danube River, ICPDR, that now the sediment balance becomes a significant water management issue, or the alteration of sediment balance becomes now a significant water management issue at the Danube. After 20 years of discussion and fights between upstream and downstream countries, downstream blaming the upstream ones, the upstream saying we didn't change so much anything. At the end, all countries on the governmental level agreed now that we have a new issue to work on water management, which is the alteration of the sediment balance. And there was a vision formulated, which is maybe not to be reached, and we told it to them. We wanted to reach a balanced sediment regime and undisturbed sediment continuity. We know that is not really feasible, but we want to work towards that. Type-specific natural bed forms and bed material, dynamic equilibrium between sedimentation and erosion is provided. And the long-term provision of appropriate habitats should be provided for the groundwater and aquatic terrestrial ecosystems. So this is for us, at least at the Danube, here a milestone in the management side. So the data could convince that we have to work on this. This ended, and I don't read it, of course, time-wise, it's not possible. There's a sediment guidance developed, and you can download it from this homepage. There were recommendations defined. For example, one I want to mention, we should develop a basin-wide sediment management concept, including torrent control, the reservoirs, the impoundment, flood risk management, agriculture, environment or ecology, down to navigation in this system. A very ambitious thing, but we have to do a balance for the whole system and to try out to find what is that what we have to do in order to get a certain amount of sediments being transported to get a more sustainable development. This needs a lot of specific restoration works, continuity improvements, dredging and refilling, for example, and many other things we can do. And then the last part here, a short part of my presentation, is to give us some hope, actually, because otherwise it would be only negative. But we all know, and there are many people here in the audience that have done in various aspects many things in this context. We developed some measures, and in this manual for stakeholders, you can see also 2 pages, fact sheets for each of the measures. We defined 50 measures from the catchment to the impoundments to the free-flowing sections, measures at the dam, measures in free-flowing sections, where we get some advice, and it's written for the stakeholders in the Danube Basin, so that they cannot say, oh, we cannot do anything because we don't know and have no ideas what to do. This was to support this development. Also to be downloaded, it's quite fresh. You can download it from this homepage as well. Of course, this is well known. All the measures we do have to be distributed over the basin. It's not enough to flush here when then the next reservoir is filled up a little bit downstream. So not easy to manage chains of reservoirs starting from the mountains. But if you do it and you also invest a little bit in this topic in research, but also the measures, we are hopeful to get a better development over the future. We all know, and I have no time to go into this, we have different sets of measures for the free-flowing sections, for the reservoirs and impoundments, to change the sediment regime, to change the bed resistance even, to reduce the energy slope, to minimize the bed shear stress. So we can play around and we can work with different measures to improve the situation. This is a graph you all know in sorts of there are several ways to show these things, how we can work in the reservoir, at the dam, in the catchment. We can also have bypass systems, sediment diversion tunnels, where Japan, Professor Sumis, I think he also Switzerland, ETH, Robert Person, his co-workers, they work a lot on this. I think it's one way to look into this topic, and I think there are webinars dedicated in the next period of this year, specifically on some of these measures. So I don't have to speak about this too much now. Also, turbidity currents, you can really guide the sediments with a higher density through the reservoir via the bottom outlet to the downstream area. Of course, we know we need to have a temperature difference. We should not get, in this example, too much turbulence and roughness. But again, this is one measure that can be done if the boundary conditions work, but then we need a large enough bottom outlet. So if all of this we really take into account in the design phase or refurbishment phase, then we can do much more in the future. This is one example here. You can have a pre-sedimentation basin for coarse material, but also here you want not to wait so long until everything is filled with sediments. This is a small reservoir, a weekly reservoir filled within one flood if you look at this. And that, of course, means we have to optimize reservoir sedimentation in 3 domains. One is this one, a technical part, where you would have the flushing efficiency, and this is the sedimentation rate. Now, you don't want to flush permanently. That's logical. No one want to do that. But if you wait too long, everything is filled full, like you see it here, you can't flush. Even the bottom outlet, everything is filled. So we want to find the optimum here, where we want to have as less as possible water losses and as much as possible sediments to be flown out. Then you have the economics. We don't want to flush, but there's maybe sluicing or other measures, but just an example here, we don't want to get off the production of energy too long, because each day here is a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of euros you lose there. So you want to, if you do flushing or sluicing, you want to minimize the not being able to produce energy. But if you do this, you come up maybe with a problem for the fish, for the environment, because then you have a concentration too high, when it's not only about concentration, but also about time. The time multiplied with the concentration gives us the issue with mortality of fish. Here, 100 fish of 100 die, no fish is dying here. So it's a nice curve here, which you might use, which we can use in order to optimize the situation. Here we want to be short, would mean a large concentration, but maybe the concentration is possible because fish can cope with concentration if it's only shortly exposed. Just as an example, so we can optimize the technical, the economics, and the ecological things which we tried to do in this reservoir as a search speicher some time ago. At the end, we want to optimize the reservoir management, but put it into the river basin context, starting with density currents, flushing, sluicing. We don't want to come into this here, not being able to do anything, as unfortunately, George was showing for the global scale to lose more reservoir volume than we build new one, which is not at all sustainable. This finally leads to different scale problems we have. We can not only work at local scale at one particular dam, we'll have to look into the upstream, downstream sections, but at the end, even at the basin scale, including the deforestation eventually, or the climate change glacier retreat. This means at all scale research, I'm very happy to see many friends and colleagues here on the research arena to work together with the management here on all scales to improve our calculation procedures and models in order to come up with more sustainable development. So this is then now to summarize and to give an outlook. Of course, we have to see reservoir sedimentation together with sediment deficit in the free-flowing sections. So it's an interplay of the two of them. We need innovation. From my point of view, we need new types of hydropower plants, including the weir basis, the width, and all of these parameters in the construction to improve the sediment continuity. We need innovation in terms of the sediment management, but also in the sediment calculation, transport calculations, models, process relations, and so on, and formulas. In the relation of catchment, riverages, but also coastline shown for the Danube and local structure, that should be headed for. We need to optimize technical, ecological, socioeconomic issues. I showed it just before. One example, if we just miss one of them, I think we have not a success on the long term. And we have a cooperation. We need a cooperation between hydropower companies, navigation, flood risk, ecology, industry, stakeholders, RNA, to get to an integrated sediment management. And I think personally, my hope would be that out of this small project funded by the Austrian Ministry, HydroSediNet could form a basis to bring together us today and further on experts, but also students, stakeholders, decision makers, ministries, and so on, in order to get awareness first on this topic, but also find solutions. And this leads finally to new policies that are necessary from the governments and governing installations to improve the sediment management in the reservoirs, but also in the whole river basin. With this, I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. I give back to you, Sid.
Thank you very much, Helmut, for that inaugural webinar. And your inaugural webinar will be part of a webinar series dedicated specifically to SediNet, and which will engage all of you to hopefully keep a meaningful conversation and collaboration going on sustainable sediment management. With that, I would like to hand it over to Praveen to close this session. And thank you very much, everyone, for attending. We had around 120 people participating in a sediment management event. So that is fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Usaid. Before we end, I'd like to ask Ayo to introduce the webinars, and I would like to encourage the different organizations and universities, especially students, to be actively engaged and use this platform to actually disseminate information, especially present their PhD thesis, PhD master's degree dissertations, short webinars to let people know what you're doing. Your work is extremely valuable moving this forward. And in due time, NICOS will organize to present the tools that you were introduced to today, especially RESCON 2. Watch out for RESCON 2. It'll be a very big improvement in the model. So we really encourage you all to participate, and we would like to keep this platform alive. And the only way to do this is through proactive engagement from all of you. So really, to all the professors from the universities, researchers, please use this. And we will be organizing webinars. So with this, I'd like to ask Ayok to give a big, small announcement on the webinars. Thank you.
Sorry, Pravin, can I ask something? Can we at the end take a group picture, a digital group picture? So maybe you can do it at the end, maybe to just turn on the video or like now, just to get a memory of this meeting, or?
Yeah, why don't we do it now?
Okay.
Right? Take
just turn on for a moment the videos, and then we can switch from 1 to page 4 and have 4 pictures. It would be a nice memory.
You'll have to give us some instructions. I don't know how you do this. Do we just switch on our camera?
Yeah, just switch on the camera, exactly.
Okay.
I hope that you can just take, I don't know how to do it, but people did that before. Has anyone any idea how to do it? We can have a screenshot, I think. Maybe I ask Martin Glass, who is here, or can you do this?
I've taken a screenshot, Helmut, but
okay, then we go to the
one page at a time.
But you have to go to 4 pages. You have to do 4 screenshots.
Yeah, yeah. So why don't we move to Ayog?
Okay.
Go ahead, Ayog. You can unmute now.
Okay, hi guys. It's great seeing everyone's presentation, and thank you for all the participation. Yes, according for the webinars, I just wanted to announce that we have various webinars lined up for every month for the whole year of learning, discussion, and interactions. These webinars will be delivered by experts from leading academic institutions, primarily the founding steering committee right now, and will focus on major areas of planning, implementation, operations of effective and sustainable sediment managed storage reservoirs and run-of-the-river hydropower facilities. Giving some examples, there'll be presentations on topics such as sustainable hydropower design, sediment monitoring, sediment routing, different types of modeling of sediment and its impacts on the ecosystem, and so on. I see there's a lot of comments made on the chat section, and the engagement's already there, which is a great thing for SediNet because that's what we want. We wanted to make a platform to engage everyone. So like Christina mentioned during her presentation on SediNet, please subscribe to SediNet if you want to follow the updates, such as the examples on the webinars. And you can also fill up the membership contract forms in order to be a member of the network. One thing I want to repeat again is there's no membership fee or nothing whatsoever. And you also have a remark, a place to write the remarks on the contact form, so you can even ask questions there. And it's a place to share interesting findings on sediment management. And even if you want to present in a webinar that's been organized in the future, you can ask us there. Thank you.
May I just add something? I think just one moment. I just wanted to thank all the chats. I think we can take the chats. I think many of the points what I read before my presentation, I tried to cover with the erosion and with the integration into the river basin. Some chats are quite important informations and also some new ideas and thoughts. I think we should really start this discussion. I'm not sure if we have the place today. I feel in the today's event we didn't plan for this too much, but in the future I think we should have also the chance to get into an interaction, into a discussion, which would be helpful, I think, as well. but the challenges are not lost, so to say, and we should take them up and to work jointly together on this.
Okay, thank you, everybody. It's been really wonderful seeing you all, and we'll be in touch. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.